Hey folks, around 4 years ago now, I made a video called Intellectuals Going Missing Under Bizarre Circumstances. And given recent events, I've seen quite a few comments asking me to look into some of the more recent disappearances that you might have heard about in America. Now, there are a number of cases that I could have gone to first, but the one I wanted to start with is Monica Jacinta Reza, and the reason I chose her specifically is that her disappearance took place in a national forest. Those of you who've been around for a while will know that national parks and forest disappearances used to be something I covered quite a lot. What makes Monica's case stand out is that she wasn't alone when she disappeared. Monica was a brilliant scientist with a remarkable career who would vanish without a trace in a rugged wilderness area in the heart of Southern California. A search effort of extraordinary scale took place, and then, in the months that followed, the case would develop a thread that reaches all the way to the White House and the FBI. Monica was a 60-year-old materials engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. And not just any engineer either. She had co-invented a superalloy that changed how American rockets are built. The patent was filed back in 2010 alongside her colleague and mentor Dallas Ann Hardwick. Dallas was a pioneering Australian-born metallurgist who had been with Monica since the earliest days of the Mondelloy work at Rockwell in the 1990s. The two women had invented the alloy together, and then separately ran both ends of the pipeline that would eventually put it inside American rocket engines. Dallas was diagnosed with cancer and retired in 2012. She passed away on the 5th of January 2014. It's worth noting, given the context of all of this, Dallas's passing appears to be entirely unconnected to any of what we're discussing here. On the morning of Sunday, the 22nd of June 2025, she set off on a hike in the Angeles National Forest near Mount Waterman with two companions from her regular yoga group, and she never came home. What followed was an absolutely enormous search effort. Dozens of search teams, helicopters, drones, scent dogs, technical rope rescuers, among others, went in to try to bring her home. After a week of exhaustive searching across miles of brutally difficult terrain, all they managed to find was a beanie hat similar to the one that Monica had on her person on a ridgeline. Additionally, they reportedly also found some lip balm, though it's unclear if that belonged to Monica or not. It has also been stated that investigators did also attempt to track her movements via cell phone towers, though the resulting information doesn't seem to have been released publicly. 9 months later, the case has escalated from what I suppose was being thought of as an isolated incident into a federal inquiry. The White House, the FBI, the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, and the House Oversight Committee are now examining Monica's disappearance as part of a wider review into around a dozen American scientists who have vanished or passed away under unusual circumstances. The committee has gone as far as sending formal letters to the FBI director, the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Defense, and the NASA Administrator, demanding briefings on the matter. What started as a weekend hike has become something that a lot of people are struggling to make sense of. Monica was by any reasonable measure one of the most accomplished material scientists in American aerospace. She earned her undergraduate degree in metallurgical engineering from Columbia University, and then her master's in materials engineering from UCLA in 1997. She spent 25 years at Pratt & Whitney before moving to Rocketdyne, where she would go on to spend over 3 decades. She ultimately moved to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, where she held the title of Director of Materials Processing, a move that happened quietly with no public announcement sometime after 2023. Her most notable scientific contribution, as mentioned, was the nickel-based superalloy she co-invented at Rocketdyne in the mid-1990s, which she and Dallas called Mondelloy. This is certainly not my area, but when you dig into what this alloy actually does and why it matters, it's genuinely impressive. Mondelloy is burn resistant in what's known as oxygen-rich stage combustion environments, which is notoriously destructive, and one in which American engines had previously struggled. The AR-1 engine program, which relies heavily on Mondelloy, was an $804 million public-private partnership designed to specifically end American dependence on foreign-made engines. Mondelloy is what makes that possible. The alloy ended up being incorporated into roughly 12 components of the AR-1 rocket engine. From 1999 onwards, Monica worked directly with the US Air Force Research Laboratory to scale it for defense applications. She was named an Associate Technical Fellow at Boeing in 2004, and that same year received the very first HENAC Luminary Award. In terms of her personal life, what has been shared publicly is quite sparse. She is known to have been a resident of Los Angeles County. What little we do know from her personal world came from a neighbour who posted on the Crescenta Valley Sheriff Station Facebook page. And they wrote, "This is my neighbour, and we are all praying Monica is safe. What we know is that she went hiking with her yoga group and her car was parked at one of their houses. How this could happen in a group setting is beyond me." A lot of people seem to share that sentiment. How does someone go missing in a group setting in broad daylight on a trail? It's something we'll get into shortly. Physically, she was described as small and fit, approximately 4 feet and 11 inches tall, weighing around 100 pounds, with grey hair and brown eyes. Sergeant John Gilbert of the LA County Sheriff's Department described her in the early days of the search as an experienced hiker who went out regularly in the area with her group and was in good shape. Beyond hiking, she was a member of a yoga studio that blends physical practice with spiritual and philosophical elements. She had recently been training to become a yoga instructor there too. The other members were her hiking companions, and they were also unfortunately the last people to see her alive. On the morning of Sunday, the 22nd of June 2025, Monica drove to the home of one of her yoga group friends and carpooled with 2 companions, one male and one female, up the Angeles Crest Highway. Their destination was the Mount Waterman area of the Angeles National Forest, specifically the San Gabriel Wilderness, a pine and chaparral high country roughly 45 minutes northeast of downtown Los Angeles, where the summits push above 8,000 feet. The group arrived at the day-use car park on the Angeles Crest Highway, situated at about 6,000 feet. It's a pullout where the Pacific Crest Trail crosses the highway, roughly a mile and a bit east of 3 Points. At approximately 9:10 in the morning, the trio set off on foot. At some point along the upper West Ridge Trail, one of the 2 companions, the woman from the yoga group, turned back towards the car as she felt that the terrain was becoming too harsh for her. Monica and the remaining male companion continued up towards the ridgeline at elevations of around 7,000 to 8,000 feet, and it was while descending the West Ridge that she disappeared. The area where she disappeared sits on the edge of what local hikers refer to as Diablo Canyon, regarded by those who know the Angeles National Forest well as some of the most unforgiving ground in the entire forest. There are ravines that drop away sharply, places where a fall could send a person hundreds of feet down into drainages that search teams may never fully reach. It's the kind of terrain that, as we'll get into, gave the search effort some of its most serious problems. According to a source speaking to the LA Magazine, which I should note that the LSAD has not officially confirmed, the pair had begun running on the terrain in the moments before she disappeared. Something described as unexpected given how steep and uneven that section was, particularly on the downhill portions of the ridge. The source essentially just said that this really was not the kind of place you go running, even as a skilled hiker. It was somewhere along this descent that things went wrong. The male companion, who was approximately 30 feet ahead of her, though it's worth noting he initially told investigators 30 yards before correcting himself to 30 feet, turned to check on her. He said Monica smiled and waved, and he kept moving. When he turned again a moment later, she was gone. He called out and received no response. The point of the disappearance itself was close to the Angeles Crest Highway, and still nobody heard or saw a thing. In fact, they were so close that the highway was said to be both visible and audible. What makes this disappearance particularly hard to explain is something that emerged during the search itself. The female companion, who had turned back earlier and was already well below the ridge, more than 500 feet lower in elevation and over 1,600 feet away as the crow flies, was reportedly able to hear the male companion calling out for Monica from that distance. If sound was carrying that far across the terrain, it's really not clear what happened. If Monica had fallen or been injured, you'd think people would have heard her calling for help. After Monica separated and seemingly disappeared, the male companion descended from the ridge. He eventually caught up with the female companion, who was well on her way, making her way down. On their descent together, the pair reportedly encountered a hiking couple. There is one further detail that has circulated in online communities tracking the case, though I want to be clear that it is unverified. There was a report that two hikers returning from Twin Peaks at around 2:30 PM heard what sounded like a female voice in anguish or distress coming from the Twin Peaks saddle area. Whether that report was ever formally investigated by search teams is not publicly known. She was wearing a red long-sleeved shirt, green hiking pants and hiking shoes, and was carrying a backpack with several litres of water. No mobile phone pings, text messages or outgoing calls from her phone during the window of her disappearance has ever been publicly disclosed by investigators. There have been no verified sightings from other hikers or from motorists on the Angeles Crest Highway since. Within hours of Monica going missing, her companions and family raised the alarm with LASD's Crescenta Valley Station. By the evening of the 22nd, the aviation unit and Montrose Search and Rescue had already been deployed. A formal press release went out ahead of what would become an expanded operation the following morning. Acting Captain Ryan A. Vienna of the Crescenta Valley Station issued the first public statement saying, "We are deeply concerned about the whereabouts of Monica, who has now been missing for over 24 hours. We have deployed numerous resources, including Air Rescue 5 and other technologies to aid in the search." By the second and third days of the search, roughly 35 searchers were in the field, and the operation had expanded to include almost every major Southern California search and rescue team. The terrain was brutal enough that searchers had to rappel on long ropes around waterfalls inside the drainages, and at one point an entire team had to be extracted by helicopter. Sergeant Gilbert described the terrain as highly technical and difficult for inexperienced hikers. On top of that, swathes of the gullies were choked with poodle dogbush, a post-fire shrub whose hairs caused severe dermatitis on contact, which blocked huge sections of the search lines. Drones and helicopters conducted FLIR thermal imaging sweeps across the area too, though it's worth noting that warm conditions combined with dense foliage can significantly reduce what thermal imaging is able to detect, which may go somewhere to explaining why those sweeps came back with nothing, despite the scale of the effort. By day 6, search teams from as far afield as Tulare County had joined. The LASD took the step of issuing a firm warning to would-be civilian searchers, making it very clear that they were not requesting or accepting volunteers. The terrain was simply too dangerous, and the coordinated grids couldn't afford to be muddied by unsupervised participants. And the last thing that they'd have wanted is for someone else to have gotten lost or injured, as things just get derailed from there. On day 8, the 29th of June, the LASD formally concluded what they termed the initial response phase of the search. Acting Captain Vienna's closing statement was candid about both the scale and the effort and the frustration at coming away with so little. A week ago today, Monica Reza went missing while hiking near Mount Waterman in the Angeles National Forest. An extraordinary search was initiated that involved not only our Los Angeles County Search and Rescue teams, but numerous resources from throughout the state leveraging local, state and federal assets. The use of forensic technology, photography, airships, canines and other specialised tools were utilised in this effort, leaving nearly no available resource untapped. One unusual detail emerged from the dog team handlers. Searchers found a beanie hat that appeared to be consistent with the one that Monica had on her person at the time. There are two versions of this event that I have come across. The first insinuates that the dog led the searchers to the beanie and then couldn't follow the scent any further. The other version suggests that the ground searchers found the beanie, the dogs were then brought to the scene and were not able to follow the scent past it. Either way, it does appear that the scent trail did end right there. It is important to say that as far as I can ascertain, it has never been confirmed that it was definitely Monica's beanie, only that it seemed to match. I suppose the fact that the dogs couldn't follow a scent could lead one to conclude that it was a coincidence and it wasn't Monica's. I'm not really sure what to make of that. No other item belonging to her has ever been publicly confirmed as recovered, so I'd have to imagine they just quite literally found nothing else. In August of 2025, search teams returned to the area following up on new leads. During that same search day, the team had to break off to rescue a completely separate woman who had fallen roughly 300 feet over the edge on the Angeles Crest Highway nearby. I'd imagine that affirmed that their decision not to allow volunteers earlier was probably right. Into the autumn, the search effort passed largely to a civilian-led Facebook group called Help Find Monica Reza in the Angeles National Forest, which became the main coordination hub for volunteers who wanted to do their own independent searching. Members of this group continued to hike the drainages and gullies south of the ridgeline on their own time. I do want to flag something here that was interesting, and a number of independent researchers have also pointed this out. On the 26th of June 2025, just 4 days after Monica went missing, and 3 days before LASD's initial search phase even officially ended, a Find a Grave memorial was created in her name. It listed that she passed away on the 22nd of June 2025, gave the location as the Angeles National Forest, and listed a disposition of remains as a green burial. Now, a green burial is a specific thing. It means that a burial has taken place with a biodegradable container directly into the earth. Obviously, as of now, Monica has never been found, so somebody declared that she had passed away, specified a burial method, and listed all this 4 days into an active search, while helicopters were still in the air above the Angeles National Forest looking for her. The page was created by an anonymous contributor, though it does now seem to have been taken down. I'm not sure if that was just a troll or something else, it's not really clear. For the best part of 8 months, Monica's case was covered primarily by local outlets, and also by people following along on online forums. That changed in February 2026, when a retired US Air Force Major General named William Neal McCasland disappeared from his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, it does seem that the two had a connection in some sense. William, as a senior Air Force research laboratory leader in the late 1990s and early 2000s, had overseen the very AFRL program that funded and scaled the Mondaloy superalloy that Monica had co-invented. And he was the military official on the other side of the table responsible for developing it into a defense asset. Within weeks of his disappearance, journalists covering his case began to notice that a former research collaborator had disappeared in an entirely different state 8 months earlier under circumstances that were equally unexplained. It was the morning of the 27th of February 2026 that McCasland interacted with a repairman at his home at around 10 in the morning. His wife left briefly and returned just after noon to find him gone. He had left behind his phone and his prescription glasses. What was unaccounted for were his hiking boots, his wallet, and a number of personal effects. A silver alert was issued the same day. The Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office received around 80 tips in the days that followed, and both the FBI's Albuquerque Field Office and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations were assisting, which gives you a sense of how seriously this is being treated beyond just the local level. 8 days after he disappeared, a grey US Air Force sweatshirt was found approximately 1.25 miles east of his home, though his family did not confirm that it was his. As of April 2026, despite searches involving drones, K9 units, helicopters with infrared cameras, and a canvass of over 700 homes in the area, no confirmed sightings of McCasland have ever emerged. Investigators have stated that they have uncovered no evidence of foul play, but have not ruled anything out. By March 2026, major outlets had picked it up. The New York Post, Newsweek, and News Nation all ran stories drawing the connection. LA Magazine published a more detailed investigation identifying Monica's hiking companions as members of her yoga studio, and added the detail about the pair apparently running on the trail just before she disappeared. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that the Trump administration had directed the FBI and the Department of Energy to review 11 cases of missing or American scientists that had passed away. This included Monica's case specifically to look for any potential commonalities. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed the Bureau was actively investigating. On Capitol Hill, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer announced the committee would also launch its own investigation into what they described as more than 10 US scientists that had either gone missing or passed away, potentially under unusual circumstances. Fox 11 Los Angeles identified 4 of those cases as specifically tied to Los Angeles County. Former FBI Assistant Director Chris Schrecker put it quite bluntly when speaking to News Nation, where he believed there was a rational explanation for all of this, and that if it wasn't just a collection of random acts, then what you're looking at is essentially modern-day espionage. Now, that's a significant claim, and it's important to note that the reviewing agencies have all been careful to say that they have not confirmed any connection between Monica's case and the others. The review is specifically intended to find out if a connection exists at all. But it's a remarkable thing for a hiker who disappeared on a California trail to become the subject of that kind of language from a senior law enforcement figure. As with these kinds of cases, there are a few different ways of looking at this, and honestly, the evidence doesn't clearly favour any one of them over the others. The most straightforward explanation is a backcountry accident. The Mount Waterman area is genuinely dangerous terrain. We're talking 7,000 to 8,000 foot elevations, cliff bands above waterfalls, drainages that can funnel a falling body hundreds of feet into ravines that may take years to find or may never be found at all. The search teams encountered this firsthand. They found themselves completely stuck and had to be extracted by helicopter. And they found a totally separate hiker fall 300 feet off the side of the highway during one of their search operations. The Angeles National Forest lies roughly 25 air miles from downtown Los Angeles, and yet it contains places where a person can disappear in a heartbeat and simply never be found again. However, I can see why there are those who find the scent ending at the hat on a ridgeline to be very unusual. What seems to have made that explanation more difficult to fully settle on is the very specific set of circumstances. She was an experienced hiker. She was last seen 30 feet behind her companion, smiling and waving, and crucially, the Angeles Crest Highway was close by to that spot. If she had fallen, cried out, or had been in distress, it seems as though her companions should have been able to detect something. The fact that nothing was heard or seen is strange. That's excluding the unconfirmed report of a potential woman heard in anguish by the 2 hikers later at 2:30 p.m. If that was Monica in the area, you might have thought that at some point the searchers, or more specifically the dogs, would have found her. The second interpretation, which has been pushed more loudly by national outlets since early this year, is that her disappearance was non-accidental and may be connected to her personal endeavours. Her work on Mondaloy gave her direct sustained access to Air Force research laboratory programs, NASA projects, and Aerojet Rocketdyne developments that would be of considerable interest to US adversaries. The subsequent disappearance of McCasland, who managed the military side of her alloy research, is the specific fact driving the federal review. The broader context adds further weight to that concern. The cases under federal review span from 2022 to 2026 and involve scientists connected to NASA, SpaceX, and other defense programs across California, New Mexico, and Massachusetts. 3 disappearances in New Mexico alone occurred within 4 months of each other in 2025, all connected to Los Alamos or nearby facilities. When you step back and look at the full picture, 5 senior cleared defense personnel disappeared on foot without a trace in a 10-month window. I want to be clear though, this interpretation is currently speculative. No evidence has been publicly released by law enforcement to support it. and no persons of interest have been named. But the federal involvement is real, and it's worth knowing about. On that note actually, and this is a bit of a tangent, but a number of people following this case have pointed out the similarity to the plotline of The Three Body Problem, the novel by Lou Sershin, and the recent Netflix adaptation. Without spoiling it for those who haven't read or watched it, the central premise involves the systematic disappearance of brilliant scientists in a way that is designed to look coincidental. I'm obviously not suggesting that's what's happening here, it's just an observation I've seen out there. It's actually a great series too, I couldn't put the books down once I'd started. Anyway, the third position is really the one that the LASD appears to be holding publicly, which is essentially one of investigative open-mindedness. No determination of foul play has been made. The case remains open as a missing person inquiry. The LASD's position seems to be the geography alone is sufficient to explain an unrecovered body, while the specific circumstances leave enough uncertainty that other explanations can't be ruled out. That view has some backing in the wider commentary too. Skeptic magazine published this analysis, which argued that the Angeles National Forest is an area where people go missing every year, and that the geography alone is sufficient to explain an unrecovered body without needing to invoke anything more unusual. Whether the pattern of cases across the country is meaningful or coincidental is ultimately the question the Federal Review is trying to answer, and it hasn't answered it yet. As of April 2026, Monica Reza has not been found, no body has been recovered, and no cause of passing has been established. And the LSAD case remains open. The Federal Review, involving the White House, the FBI, and others, is active, but has not yet produced a publicly disclosed breakthrough. What we know, in the end, is that on a Sunday morning in the summer of 2025, a 60-year-old metallurgist, one of the most accomplished material scientists in American aerospace, a woman who waved and smiled at her companion on a ridge above the Angeles Crest Highway, and then somehow, somewhere, she simply was just not there anymore. A week of helicopters, scent dogs, drones, and teams from 8 Californian counties found a hat, and further searches found nothing more. And the federal government is now asking whether that fact sits alongside a pattern. That unfortunately brings us to the end of this. Please do remember to subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already, and if you could like the video, I'd appreciate it very much. Or leave a dislike if you disliked it. A big thank you as always to the patrons who've been running around on the screen. Be safe all. Peace.